Hello, welcome everybody to this morning's webinar with FX Street, where we're going to be doing some live trading. I hope you've all had a good week in the markets, good month in the markets, and you're looking forward to this session. Before we get started, just a few things that we need to, good morning. There's a few things that we need to cover. First of all, the content of this webinar is not investment advice and should be used purely for educational purposes only, okay? Because basically we're not authorized or regulated to give investment advice. So all I'm doing here is I'm going to trade in front of you and talk you through the trades that I'm going to be taking. So it's not investment advice and should be used purely for educational purposes only. All participants are advised to seek their own counsel prior to investing or entering into any trade. Spread betting and any other type of financial trading carries a high level of risk to your capital with the possibility of losing considerably more than your initial investment. And the content of this video may not be suitable for all investors, and an individual should ensure that they're fully aware of the risks involved. Okay, and if necessary, you should seek the advice of an independent financial advisor. So a little bit about myself before we get going into the markets. My name's Alex Ong. I'm the co-founder of a website called Traders Corner. That's been established for about the last 5 years now. And my brother and I, it's something I run with my brother, and we've been trading for about the last, well, over a decade now. We consult for a private investor fund in Europe. We've also authored many different articles for different FX publications. And if you want to find us on Facebook, it's Traders Corner Online. And on Twitter, I'm at AlexOngUK. Okay, so that's enough about me as a bit of a brief introduction. Now let's jump across to the charts. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the various different currency pairs. We're going to see if we can identify some potential trades. Okay, so if anybody has any trades at any particular pairs that they want to look at, then we can obviously look at those. And basically, I'm going to see if there are any trades setting up, any that I'd be happy taking. I'll talk you through why I'd be happy taking, and then I'd obviously go ahead and put them on in the market. You'll probably notice I'm using a slightly different trading platform today. So usually I use NinjaTrader, but I've been using TradingView a lot more and more for our equities and stuff of late. So I thought I'd give it a go for the currencies as well, to try and keep it all in one place. So we'll see how that goes. So far, so good. I like the look of it. It's quite nice because you get to use it within the browser, so I can use it on my Mac natively, as opposed to having to have Parallels installed and stuff like that. Okay, so let's start right at the top. Good morning, pound dollar, please. Okay, we will most certainly get to that. In fact, let's start at the top, because once we go through like this, and we can get an idea as to what all of the currencies are doing, which is one of the things that I do with my trading of FX. So as opposed to just taking one trading position, okay, so let's say, for example, I want to go long the Aussie dollar. So I believe that the Australian dollar is going to get stronger. Okay, instead of just taking it against one currency, so like let's say the Aussie dollar, I'd look to build a position of 4 or 5 different pairs within the Aussie to exploit that particular view. Now, I'm not saying I'd take additional risk on each pair, but what I might do is break it down. So instead of taking, 1% over one pair, I might take 1 or 2% split over 5 or 6 different pairs. Now, what this does is it mitigates our risk. It diversifies our portfolio. So the best case scenario, or the worst case scenario, is that you get taken out at a similar sort of loss as you would have been taken out with just one pair, right? The best case scenario is that they all go with you, and you probably make something similar to what you would have made with one pair. But here's the great part about it. There's a middle ground, okay? So there's this middle area where some of them make money, some of them don't money, and more often than not, you're still left with a profit, okay? Whereas if you're just trading the one currency, it's very black and white. You make or you lose money. That one pair has to go exactly the way that you want it to go at that exact moment in time. Otherwise, you'll be struggling. Okay? Does that make sense to you all? So what I tried to look for is I looked for a currency pair, or a particular currency that's doing the same across the board. So it's either like really strong against everything, or it's really weak against everything. And I build a position made up of many different pairs. Does that make sense to you all? So a few months ago, we were talking about running a portfolio and things like that. And this is basically, I'm going to show you how to build in such a portfolio. So looking at the Aussie Canadian, we can see that, well, this is the day trading one. So let's take a look at the, in fact, no, let's stick with this one here. We can see that it's, from a 4-hour perspective, it's breaking up. Okay, so we do have momentum to the upside, although we are in a range here. For the 1 hour, it's also breaking up, but we're coming up to a resistance here. So that might be something that would discourage us from taking the trade. And from the 5-minute perspective, which is where we would look to execute, we're playing around with these highs here. So it's broken the high, and then it failed to get any higher than that. So that's something that we might want to, we'll keep an eye on it anyway. So I'll put that on there. And this is one of the great things, by the way, about this trading view that I really like, is that you put on a support line or resistance line on one chart, and it moves it across to all of the other charts, which is, I find quite cool. So the Aussie CAD is, the Australian dollar is looking strong against the Canadian dollar, which is something that we will note down there. The Aussie franc is moving in the complete opposite direction. So that, I mean, the 4-hour and the 1 hour are both still range bound, but from a momentum perspective, from a day trading perspective, the momentum's to the downside. So let's move on to the Aussie Yen. Aussie Yen, similar sort of stories. We're still, let's get rid of that there. So we're still in a consolidation phase here on the 4-hour and 1 hour. So it's basically telling us, and this one is sort of moving to the upside, but maybe not quite. So what this is building a picture for us here that perhaps the Australian dollar isn't ready to move in any one particular direction because the signals are conflicting. And I prefer to get into a trade when you have a lot going for you. So you've got, multiple different currency pairs confirming the same thing. You want the Aussie, if we're going to trade the Aussie, we want it to be strong or weak across the board. We don't like it so much when it's a bit of a combination of both. Okay, but it's still on our radar because there still are some potential moves there. The Aussie New Zealand is firmly in a downtrend here. Okay, so we might note down there, looking at the 4-hour and the 1 hour, and the New Zealand dollar is something that we might want to pay attention to. So as we progress through, looking at all of the rest of the pairs, I'm going to note down that against the Aussie dollar, it's extremely strong at the moment. So it's strengthening against the Aussie dollar. And let's just see if that is carried through into the other pairs. Okay. So the Aussie dollar itself, again, it's just range bound. So I'm not really keen on taking any trade in the Aussie right now, but we'll move along and we'll see if against some of the other crosses it shows something different. So the Canadian Swiss franc. So the franc was gaining against the Aussie, and we can see it's also gaining against the Canadian dollar. So I'm also going to note down here that the Swiss franc, okay, is strong, as is the New Zealand dollar. Okay. The yen, bit of a muchness. It's in a range. Now the franc here, if it's going to be doing the same as the others, we'd expect this to be climbing, which it is. So it looks like, at the moment, it looks like a trade based on Swiss franc strength might be a good one to take. We would take it across the board. The Euro Aussie, let's get rid of this here. So the Euro Aussie is in the middle of no man's land. Hold on. Let's get rid of that. So Euro Aussie in the middle of no man's land. Euro CAD. So the Canadian dollar is weakening. Let's go back to what we had on the Aussie CAD. I think that was weakening as well. So there's another potential idea. So at the moment, I've got the New Zealand dollar strengthening, Swiss franc strengthening, Canadian dollar weakening. Okay. Euro franc would expect this to be strengthening, which it is as well. So it's kind of confirming our view here. So at the end of going through all of these pairs, we should be able to come up with something with some sort of a trade idea. Now the euro yen is climbing to the upside. We've got quite some momentum there, which could be nice. Euro pound. So the euro is actually quite strong as well, looking at all of this here. So I'm going to note down that the euro, we might have the potential to build a euro position in there as well. That's going to be an interesting one. So New Zealand's strong already in the euro. So the New Zealand is the strongest of them all so far. So even though the euro was appreciating against some of the other currencies, it's depreciating versus the New Zealand dollar. So at the moment, it looks like the Kiwi is a strong candidate for us. And obviously the Canadian dollar is looking weak. So let's have a look. Although euro dollar's higher, it's moving higher with some momentum. So clearly the market's thinking about something here. Pound, Carney speaking at the moment, so that might be a little bit wild. Pound Aussie, not really a lot going on there. Pound CAD, what did we say? We said this week we're expecting, yep, so pound CAD. We look at this on the 1 hour, so the Canadian dollar is certainly weak. Might be able to build in a position there. Pound franc, as we expected, so true to form, the franc is appreciating versus sterling. Pound yen, not much to do there. New Zealand, yep, indeed. I'm liking the look of the New Zealand at the moment. We might be putting on a couple of New Zealand trades in just a moment's time. New Zealand dollar versus the Canadian dollar. So this one should really be climbing because the Canadian dollar is particularly weak. New Zealand dollar is strong. New Zealand francs would be a range-boundish one. Yep. You see, because we know that the franc is particularly strong at the moment, as is the New Zealand dollar. So it makes sense that all of them would be. New Zealand yen. Turkey and New Zealand dollar. Okay, let's add up here. We need to get in the dollar yen. So add that to our watch list. Somewhere. Why can I not see it? Oh, down here, isn't it? So let's look at the dollar yen. Nowhere, dollar CAD. Quite some momentum to the downside there, isn't there? Quite some momentum indeed. And if you look at this on the 40-minute chart, it's rolling over. And the dollar franc. Dollar Swiss also. Okay. So, looking at all of those there, I think I'm going to build a position. What are your thoughts? Anybody got anything that they'd like to add? So from my perspective, the dollar CAD here, if it breaks through this level over here, I want to be in. So that's sort of what I'm looking at right now. And I'll start noting some of these trades down. And once I've noted them all down, I can then decide how I want to play it. And the idea is that we get into enough trades, okay, to be able to diversify all of our risk. So we said New Zealand is one that we particularly want to look at. Is there any obvious opportunity? Okay, so there's a support line here that we can set. If the New Zealand dollar breaks below that, we'll be in there. So note that down. Sorry, Aussie New Zealand. Moving through CAD franc. So CAD franc is also a potential one, although the entry, there isn't as clean an entry. There's an intraday break here that we could look to exploit. Generally in there. CAD Yen, nothing much on the table. Aussie Yen is long. We've broken the resistance zone. So this would have been the ideal point to get in. We'll put that in over here. Okay, but how far are we away from that? 64.86. If that pulls back a little bit, that's still a potential one we can jump into. We just don't want to chase it. Okay, so we've got CAD franc. Euro Swiss. The entry isn't as clear on this one here. Euro New Zealand. We could look to take a break below that low there, but I'd equally like to see it pull back a little bit and then. So it's a potential. Okay, Euro New Zealand. You've got what we end up with at the end of all of it. So pound CAD. Pound CAD, pound CAD. So I don't mind this. It just looks like there's a bit of momentum going for it. So I think there's probably better trades out there. Okay, this one here I really like. I really like this because on the 4 hour, it's breaking lower. You can see it, the intraday momentum there. So this one for me is one that I really like. So I'll keep that on there. So what are we saying here? Pound franc. Pound New Zealand. Again, this one's a nice potential one. New Zealand CAD's really one that you have to be in, isn't it? Being that the Canadian dollar's weak and the New Zealand dollar's strong. New Zealand franc, what am I thinking here? Just they're both strong. You're trying to trade a strong currency against a strong currency. It's not particularly clever. New Zealand yen. Yeah, that's potential. That has potential. Let's put that in there. So New Zealand dollar. See, it's a long way from the moving average here. And I feel like we've got quite a lot of exposure to the New Zealand dollar, so there's no need to chase this one, I don't think. And then looking dollar franc, certainly lower. So we've got one. I've already been to that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've got 8 opportunities here. So what I'll look to do is I'll look to take about 0.5% or 0.25% on those 8 opportunities. 0.25% each gives me 2% maximum risk. Okay, and if they all go with me, that'll be a nice windfall. If they all go against me, 2%, that's fine. I can live with that. And if it's something in between, I should end up at the end of the day or the end of the next few days ahead of the game after taking all of these trades. Okay, obviously we take very, very small positions. So let's go to the broker. Does that make sense to everybody? Are there any questions on what I'm doing here? Do you all trade in a similar way? So what did I say? Dollar, CAD, franc, Aussie, New Zealand. Okay, so let's go and put on our positions here. So Aussie, New Zealand, I'm going to put in an entry to get short at 1.0619 for me. That's what I'm looking at. A stop of 1.0749. Somewhere up above that level there. What about Euro New Zealand? So you get short at 1.6505. You could wait for the round number to be broken, so maybe say 1.6498. And then I'll have a protective stop above here at 1.779, 1.6779. So do you see how you don't necessarily need to overanalyze this, right? Just go with the flow of things. That's exactly what we're doing here. We're not overanalyzing anything. So the pound franc, I'd like to see it get to 1.690. Then if we do that, 1.4823. Okay, pound New Zealand. So that's a short now, pretty much. With a stop above 2.280, 2.2810. New Zealand CAD. Very high, pushing higher. Waiting for a setup on this one. There's nothing obvious there. And this here is all about the break of that high. So if we get out above 81.88, so 81.90. You want to have your stop below the low, so 80.62. And that will be my, oops, did I get the CAD franc? I didn't, hold on. CAD franc is a sell below these lows, isn't it? It has to be. $7,295. And then we get a stop in there. 0.7351. That would be nice. Moving into the dollar rank, last one there, which is an entry now, and in reality a stop at 95.80. Okay, and that does it. So, what's our exposure? So we're long against the franc on 3 pairs. Okay, we believe that it's going to appreciate. The New Zealand dollar, we're betting on New Zealand dollar, so Kiwi strength, and we're doing that against 1, 2, 3 pairs. So we've got franc and Kiwi. So we're betting on the strength of those. And then obviously, by virtue of the fact that we're doing that, we're looking at euro weakness against Kiwi and pound weakness, which I guess is sort of aligned with fundamentals, what's going on in the Eurozone. In terms of Kiwi and stuff, we would expect that to depreciate over a period of time. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 positions. That I'm building into now. Does anybody have any comments? Any questions? Is your trade only confirmed when different time frames are better? Yeah, pretty much. I try to do it where the majority of the charts sort of agree with each other. Or at least I'm seeing momentum on those charts in the same direction. Does that make sense? So do you see the benefit of what we're doing here? Do you see the benefit of taking multiple? I'm not saying that I'm going to be risking over 8 positions, 1% on each position. I'm saying I'm going to cut down my portfolio so I can have exposure to 8 different positions, and hopefully they will all make me money. You know, if they don't, then hopefully some of them will make me money. Some of them will lose, obviously. But overall, I'll come out up and I'll come out ahead of the game. Yeah? What is, of course, useful also to do is to take a look at your longer term time frames. If I look at like the dailies for those same pairs, so looking at the CAD franc, you see that you're not trading into anything huge. So CAD franc, we're looking to sell, and we can see that overwhelmingly this chart is short. So that makes sense. Aussie New Zealand, we're looking to sell. And we can see that eventually, is that right? Yep. So the daily has broken over, the weekly is short. So we're in line there. which is a nice thing. Euro New Zealand, the weekly chart is got momentum to the downside, but you'd have to say it's still in an uptrend. The daily is sort of rolling over. It's broken below the 100 moving average. So you'd expect a little bit of downside movement there, which is fine. Pound franc. So the pound franc we're looking to go short, and the weekly and daily is sort of in no man's land. So we just trade the volatility on that. Pound New Zealand. So the pound New Zealand is similar to the euro New Zealand in that the daily is rolling over, although the weekly is still extremely bullish. New Zealand CAD. Is bullish on all of them. So weekly is actually just broken structure there. New Zealand Yen. Same sort of difference. And then finally dollar franc, which is a little bit more range bound. So the dollar franc and the pound franc are a little bit less certain than the others. So from that perspective, you might decide that actually you don't want that risk on the table because the trends for those aren't there. So we can then take our 8 positions down to 6 positions. Yeah, so we're looking at like the CAD franc, Aussie New Zealand, Euro New Zealand, pound franc, pound New Zealand CAD, New Zealand yen. Although looking at the franc charts, the Swissy charts, particularly with the pound and the euro, might decide to take those off the table. See, trading doesn't have to be complex. It's only us as human beings that make it this way. Trading is actually a relatively straightforward endeavor. Are there any questions? There we go. If you drop me an email, I can talk to you more about the strategy. Sharkats. So if you drop me an email too, I just said them, Shahel, but I'm not going to say them again because I don't necessarily want people just copying my trades. It's not investment advice. It's more I'm displaying the approach. I'm showing you the approach to the markets. Okay, so I'm not regulated to give investment advice. So it's more the approach to the markets and the way that I go about looking at the pairs, which should be important as opposed to which pairs they are. Does that make sense? Yeah, no, I appreciate that. What I'm saying, okay, is that I'm not going to just keep repeating the pairs because I'm not telling people to trade them. And it kind of comes across like you want me to let you know which ones they are so that you could then go and throw on some trades, and I'm hesitant to do that. So I'm happy to go through the process as we've just done, but I'm not going to specifically say, look at this, this, and this. So are there any questions? Is it maximum exposure? No. I mean, if I'm more confident about the direction, I'll be willing to take on more. I'm just giving you an example. But if you take, roughly 2-3% exposure against all of them, let them run for a few days, you'll see that you'll be doing a more positive risk reward across the board. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that one particular trade gets you a positive risk reward, but as long as you're coming out with more than 2% after a few days of having it on, you're going to be doing well. Exactly, sorry. Sahib, is that how I say your name? I take it I pronounced it awfully. I can only apologize for that. So, are there any questions? No, I let the trades run, Mark. I look for the big levels. So for example, if we look at let's go look at the Aussie New Zealand. So I have an idea of where it can go to. Looking at this chart here, we're trading into fresh air. So I'd at least want it to kind of move down towards the 100 pips or so down here and then see where it goes. But with this sort of momentum here, I'd expect over the next few weeks that the market would drop sort of down towards the 1.000 level. Looking at this here, if you look at the momentum in that candle there, you can see that the market from a weekly basis got up here, was consolidating a bit, and then gave up on that consolidation and then broke down. And that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing that breakdown. So that tells me that the market is going down to here. Fundamentally. The secret with trading is not to overcomplicate things, right? Making money really isn't difficult. It's when you put too much emphasis on just one particular trade, on one particular outcome. If that's your approach to the market, there's no wonder you're going to feel bad when the trade doesn't go with you. And you'll face all of those psychological issues. It's normal. You'd expect that to happen. But if you've got a multitude of different trades on that you can take, then the outcome of one is really pretty irrelevant. Wouldn't you agree? So from my perspective, they are the trades that I want to be in. I feel, looking at the charts, looking at the direction, they're the ones where when they hit their levels, I'm going to be entered into. The pound and the dollar franc ones, a little bit more hesitant, if I'm honest, because from a longer term perspective, they're a lot more range bound. But certainly the others, looking at the Canadian weakness and the New Zealand strength, that's certainly something that's interesting. So, any questions? There seems to be a distinct lack of questions today. Is that because I've explained it so well, you're actually looking at your charts this second and saying if you can do the same sort of analysis? Or, the other alternative, Is it that actually you're completely confused and you don't know what to ask? Don't all type at once, you know? Clear but just a nervy market. Yes, indeed. Perfect. So who here is profitable with their trading? Who here makes money month after month after month after month? Nope. Okay. You think that's a strategy problem or a issue with with yourself, a human being problem? Okay, fair enough. Good stuff. Been over trading. Yeah, that is a nice. What makes more money for me, teaching or trading? Depends what sort of a year I have trading. Depends what sort of a year I have teaching as well. So there can be years when the teaching does outweigh the money for the trading, and there are years when it's the opposite. Yes, indeed, pen on fire. Does that answer your question, Van der Meulen? A little. How can I elaborate? I do find it fascinating, though. I mean, I understand why you ask the question. It is big business. It can be. And as I said, I understand why you ask the question about do you make more money from trading or do you make more money from educating? Um, but the reality is, as long as an educator, not just myself, but others, let's say, for example, there was someone out there, I don't know, hypothetically, and let's say they had a small account. So let's say they only had 50 grand in their account. Okay. For example, just hypothetically. Now with that 50 grand, they could double that. So they could make, 100% in a year. But they ran an education business, which made them, let's say £75,000 a year. Would it make what they're teaching you any less valuable just because they had a smaller account to trade with? As long as you have something valuable to offer, why not? You see, it's a results business, isn't it? So as long as you can show people, you can prove to people that you can do something well, why not? Exactly. Okay, guys. Well, I hope you've all enjoyed this session here. Warren, been looking into the Dextra, any upcoming webinar? Yeah, we had one this morning, Warren. Oh, you're talking about webinars on FX Street or a live trading session? Well, our community, we had a live trading session this morning. With FX Street, I will see what we can put in the diary. Okay. Okay, guys. Well, we'll wrap it up here. Just a quick note, just to let you know that my brother and I have just launched our mentoring program for the first time ever. Okay, so if you're interested in signing up for that, that actually begins on the 4th of November. So if you drop me an email, I posted it in the chat further up or something like that. If you're interested in it, let me know and I'll send you the details. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this today. I hope you got some good value out of it. Hopefully these trades that I'm going to be in when they hit their entries as a result will make me money. Otherwise, if you need anything else, drop us an email. FX Street, thank you very much for having us, as always. And we will look forward to speaking to you very, 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 very soon. Okay? So take care now, and I'll speak to you all soon.